Yeah, we'll let some people join. Good morning to those of us joining. I can see a few people trickling in. We'll just hold for a couple of minutes to let people join. I can see that we've now got about 21 participants. I'll just give it another minute and then we'll make a start. Right, so I think I'll make a start now. So welcome everyone to the webinar. So this is a BioVale AD special interest group, and it's on AD research in Yorkshire and showcasing what's going on. And we know there's a lot of research going on in this region, and we thought it would be interesting to do a webinar to showcase some of it. So for those of you who don't know about the BioVale AD special interest group, we've been going for about 6 years now, and we've got an amazing 530 members in total. And we put on events like this a couple of times a year, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes webinars. And we're also willing to help our members one-to-one. So if you want introductions, or if you're trying to get a project started in this area and you need some support, you can get in touch with us. So we've got a busy programme to get through this morning. And the Q&A is going to be at the end. So if you've got any questions, put them in the chat and then we'll deal with those at the end. And we're going to kick off with some case studies of work that was funded through our ADKey ERDF programme. So the ADKey programme offered funded support for AD sector and Yorkshire businesses, where businesses received up to £2,000 of support for things like analytical work, such as digestate analysis and treatment, desk-based support from staff at the BDC, or access to equipment. And first, we're going to hear from three projects that were delivered as part of the ADKey programme. And first of all, we're going to hear from Hans Eric Gording from Verdant Biotech. And here are his slides. And Hans, over to you.
Hi, good morning, and thank you very much for Bio and for inviting me to speak at this conference. So next slide, please. So briefly today, I'll be talking about a brief introduction to Verdant Biotech and my partner Biorenewables ABT in Germany. Go into more detail about the study that we carried out at BDC. And then from that, we can then look at the implications of this study, what that meant to that particular biogas plant, with additional work carried out in Berlin by Biorenewables scientists. Next slide, please. So Verdant Biotech and Biorenewables, we work together in the UK. Our background is enzymes, and we are able to provide a number of services to plants, such as analysing fermented material to basically choose the most bespoke, best enzyme for that substrate mix. But we're also able to calculate potential savings and improvements to plants, such as the reduction in expensive feedstock, such as maize, or what a yield increase would mean in real terms on gas to grid or CHP output. Next slide, please. So the B2C study itself, we work with a fairly large plant, gas to grid, using more than 100 tonnes of fresh matter per day. And what is interesting is obviously the usual suspects there: maize silage, rye hoe crop silage, but also the amount of farmyard manure, cattle slurry, and chicken manure. In terms of fresh matter, that was almost 48% of the substrate mix. So considerably higher than your average biogas plants in the UK. Next slide, please. So the study that we were funded for was a 33-day biomethane potential test at the Biorenewables Development Centre. During that process, we would measure total biogas production on a daily basis, but also the content and quality of the biogas. So we're looking at the ratio of methane to carbon dioxide. And ultimately, we want to see if using an enzyme makes any difference to biogas yield and production. Next slide, please. So the results were very interesting, and they started fairly slowly. So the first 10 or 11 days, there was not a huge amount going on. And we suspect it may have been that the methanogens had been refrigerated, they were a little bit dormant, they hadn't been fed. But after about 10 or 11 days, in all groups, the methanogens came to life and started producing biogas. But what is more interesting is that enzyme number 1 had a significant drew away quite quickly after about 17 days. There was clear water between that and the 2 other enzymes, and also the no enzyme control group. So that was certainly notable and very interesting. Next slide, please. And when we look at from the raw data, we could also look at the amount of biogas produced per gram of organic volatile solids. And again, no enzyme, enzyme 2, enzyme 3, there was no real statistically significant difference between those groups. But enzyme 1 actually had quite a marked effect. Next slide, please. So the conclusions of the report was that enzyme 1 increased biomethane production by 13%. This was in a very animal manure rich substrate mix. Enzyme 2 and 3 had no real effect, and they were -6 and -2%, but it's unlikely that the introduction of enzymes would worsen the biogas production. So it's somewhere within the margin of error. But the important conclusion was that all enzymes improved the quality of the biogas. There was a higher proportion of biomethane than carbon dioxide compared with the control group. And the conclusion was that enzyme number 1, ultrapart, was the best performing of 3 enzymes. Next slide, please. So why would that be? Well, we have the ability to analyze enzyme activities, and these were based on recommended dosage levels for all 3 enzymes. So enzyme number 1 in green, which is standardized at 100%. And we have enzyme number 3 in orange, which is the one in use at the plant at the time. And enzyme number 2, which is the one they have used previously. And moving across, we have soluble cellulase activities. We have insoluble cellulase, which we call filter paper, because that is predominantly cellulose, xylanase, and glucanase. And all these are key building blocks to plant material. And they have varying amounts of these, and this would certainly be useful in breaking down plant material. However, enzyme activity number 5 is quite different. Because if you look at what a cow has done, it has eaten that plant material, it has given it a pretty good go at anaerobically digesting it, and what comes out the other end is not a whole lot of the first stuff, but a lot of dead microbial biomass, which the other activities have a very limited effect on. Next slide, please. So clearly something is happening. We are getting much better biogas yield with enzyme number 1. And what would that mean inside? Oh, you started it, okay. So what we did was to measure the viscosity of the various materials. So moving from left to right, we have K is the German version for control group. We have Metapart, then we have 3 ultrapart variants, and then we have Meta Plus, which was in use at the plant at the time. And what you can see is there's quite a marked reduction in viscosity in the ultrapart ranges. And that was just two things. Firstly, that more volatile organic solids are being broken down to make biogas. But the implication of that as well is that you'll have less energy consumption for stirring, pumping, less equipment wear and tear. So, but most importantly, you're having more biogas produced. Next slide, please. One more time, there we go. Okay, so the conclusion and the economic implication is that we certainly do get a yield increase. It's quite a significant one with ultrapart. And calculate the plant could produce exactly the same amount of gas grid input or CHP input by doing nothing but adding enzyme, and they could reduce their maize consumption daily by about 25%. And that would mean that for a typical 1 megawatt size plant, we're looking at a 6-digit saving just in feedstock alone. And with the high maize price at the moment, partly due to poor harvest last year, but also the conflict in Ukraine, maize prices are at pretty high levels at the moment and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. Alternatively, the plant could also keep using the same amount of substrate every day, and they could increase their gas grid injection by about 11.5%. So this is 24/7, 365 days a year. And depending on what approved scheme they're on, that could also be worth a lot of money. But ultimately, it will be the plant's decision of how much maize they want to save, how much more gas they want to produce, and somewhere there'll be a perfect point where they get the best of both worlds. And from our experience is that the economic gains from using enzymes on this substrate mix is quite significant. For every pound spent on enzymes, £2 are returned in increased profitability for the plant. Thank you. Next slide, please. So my contact details are here. So please feel free to either reach out in the Q&A session afterwards. Alternatively, I'm available on email, phone call. You're very welcome to contact me, and copies of the reports and other studies are available, which I'll be very happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. That was really interesting, and I particularly enjoyed the video of the things sliding down the screen early in the morning. That's give everyone an appetite. Yeah. Fantastic, and ultimately, a lot of these things come down to what are the savings, that people can make, and it's really interesting to kind of to read those figures. So, right, I will move on now to our next presenter, which is Sue Jefferson, who's going to be talking about Circular Yorkshire. A very different type of project. Right, Sue, you should now have control of your slides.
Excellent. Well, thank you for inviting me, and I think this highlights the range of services and support that people can get from BDC and BioVale. I'm going to talk about the role of engagement with communities when looking to put in anaerobic digesters. What we are looking to do in Malton and Norton in North Yorkshire is become the first circular economy market town, and we want to become as famous for being circular as we are for being Yorkshire's food capital. And that is about creating a culture where we value resources, we are trying to avoid wastage, and it brings economic and social benefits as well as environmental ones. And the role of engagement is key for any town-wide initiative, but particularly, I think, anaerobic digester. And actually, I was first introduced to AED at a BioVale event, and I met people there who have become key partners in this project, and we wouldn't have succeeded without them. So that networking element is a real value add for us as well. The AdKey project particularly was something that was facilitated a key engagement webinar. We did a live Facebook event with residents, and at a time where there was a lot of nervousness about AD, and the facilitation there enabled us to focus on the right messages and also not worry about the whole technical piece of it. So we could really concentrate on listening and feeding back to people's concerns. What we have actually proposed for the town is take the food waste and empower the town. That was the concept. It's probably a bit smaller than that, but the idea was a community-led anaerobic digester. And we're looking at commercial food waste. One thing is really important. There is excess waste comes from some of our local food producers, but there's a thriving service for that with free fridges, and we didn't want to be competing with that, because for us that's all part of the 7 R's with the circular economy, and giving them a use is helpful. So this is stuff that is inedible. But in our discussions with the team and advisors, we also wanted to introduce kind of an enterprise hub to actually start to explain to people about what happens with food and waste, and start to build that understanding with schools, with local businesses, and so on. And the benefits are multiple, as you can see, and as you're familiar with, and you can see some of the partners that we worked with from that. Now, one of the things that I think is striking with engagement is not only have we, through the feasibility work we did, identified a really excellent site to put our AD, but how do you convey what the benefit and what an AD does to those who aren't familiar with it? And who'd have thought the power of one sausage roll could create such interest from people? Because the fact that we often share is, did you know that the waste from just producing one sausage roll, even if it's all eaten up, put it through an AD, will power a laptop for over half an hour? And the reaction we get from people is, wow, and suddenly they're interested and engaged. And now, so we've identified a site, we're in the process of planning, seeking planning permission, and we've got a business model where we now need to raise £4 million too for that. So let me share with you some of the feedback that we've had from the public, and this is actually both business and residents. Unbelievably, I think people might find that the concept and the appeal for this anaerobic digester has been actually almost 90% in terms of very good or a good idea. And normally, when I've looked at other data nationally, it's far less appealing to people. But you can see very few people, less than 5%, thought it was a bad idea at all. Why do they think it's a good idea? Well, in fact, we had over kind of 90% agreement with some of the statements. So we had to tease it out. And I think that's why I'm highlighting here, looking at the very important elements. But the things that are important to a community, if you're going to put in an AD, is less road miles and that incineration of waste and where it would otherwise go to. We live in a rural community, so the bio-based fertilizer is high appeal, and we've got several farmers who have already engaged with us who want to take that and work with that. The factors, say we've got renewable energy, the educating school children, so all of those were important, as you can see, but it highlights, and we worked obviously with this and with the webinar that we did, and the feedback is what is important to our community, not just what we think we want to do. For example, just powering local businesses. I'll let you read some of these quotes, because some of these came from the webinar, some from an independent research study that we did. But you can see from the public, when you take the time to explain what you're looking to do and you listen to them and cover their concerns, they really are excited about something that's tangible here. And what I wanted to highlight was, this is by listening to people and putting in place elements that are important to them and show they're listening. It's not being done to them, but with them is really important. And that education bit, you can see it's appealing. And the point, which is why we're looking at the circular town, is we feel that people often feel they can't make a difference, or there's too many barriers in the way. This is one that very much is something that by supporting it or by being involved, they can make a difference. In terms of business response, again, you can read the value of this, but the one on the left-hand side is someone who's already working with an anaerobic digester business and will pay a premium in order to support and not travel as far as required here. So for us, it tells you this isn't just any old AD. Community ADs or engaging the community can have a real added value commercially as well as socially. I'd also just highlight the comment on the right-hand side. Often engagement can be just taken as a must-do, a minimum consultation, lip service to it. But that feedback about the transparency, the questions answered, the listening to people pays dividends. And please, my plea, if you take away one thing, is whatever you're doing in terms of consultation, do it properly, be prepared to change rather than pay lip service, because you will reap the rewards. So the good news is we are available for consultation and consulting services in terms of engagement, but I'm going to give you the tips so you can actually do this yourselves. And so our learnings was making that idea relevant. That sausage roll really captured the storyline for people, being clear what the local benefits are and then checking and feeding back with those, and consider what would be sensitive. So heavy traffic going through the centre of Malton is a real challenge we read about all the time on Malton, Moan and more. So we looked at sites and solutions that would avoid going through the town centre, to any degree. And then this next bit, this two-way dialogue, this is where BDC were so helpful and key for us being able to put on these different events, but listening generously, acknowledging concerns and doing it every which way. We did surveys, we met in town, we had events, we did presentations, we did live webinars, and go where the people are, like Facebook and so on. And, rather than dismiss, acknowledge the concerns and try and find solutions around them. And, the partners that we've worked with have been excellent in terms of accommodating and designing different solutions to what we planned, because that adapting plans is really critical. And sharing back, we heard this, that's why we've changed, and here's some choices to be made. So it's a circular discussion that happens. It can take some time, but the rewards are beneficial for that. In terms of, well, does it work? Well, what I can share is it's not yet in the public domain, but we've been advised that we have got planning permission for our project. But the best thing of all, it's been with 0 objections, which I think is unheard of in the AD world. So, as I say, BDC, NNFCC, Aardvark are all people we've met through our connections with BioVale. And I'd just like to thank them as well, because we wouldn't have achieved such a success without them, and that conduit that BDC and BioVale have been. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue, and it's great to hear that you've made some useful connections through us, and great to hear about the engagement that you've done. We have had a question which I think we could probably just answer quickly now, probably. So, have any of the community made complaints such as odour, or has this not been a concern in the area?
No, it's a very good question. We identified right up front what would be the likely concerns: odour, traffic, noise, visual impact. I think the usual pieces. And odour is a very good one, because I did go around an AD. I've been around several places now myself, and one of the things that the project team, design team probably hear from me more often than anything is, you know, I don't want any odour, and partly because we're going to have that enterprise hub on site, so we'll be having meetings there. And as I often say to people is, you know, I walk around the town, and if we have any issues, people will know where to find me. And so it's absolutely key. So there was, I'd say we probably were proactive in raising, here are concerns that people sometimes have about AD. This is how we're looking to mitigate them. So odour was one that we actually were quite upfront about. And, you know, we gave them feedback, various things. One is the permits say you must not have that odour outside of that site. So we said there are other controls beyond us in place, but we are designing it so that we can minimize it even within the site, by the things that we would be looking to do and put into the design element and so on. And actually what we found for people, that kind of being transparent reassured people. And what we saw on Facebook comments, for example, was some people would say, oh, they said nice things over in somewhere else, and then they, you know, when they actually built it, they disregarded it. And we had other people counter that. We didn't even have to counter it, to say, no, you know, we've been consistent and transparent, and, you know, they've got a belief and a trust in us. But yeah, we're all damaged by, you know, poor design or poor build or poor operation that can go before us. And I think we've all got a duty to try and kind of up the standards. But so that's a long answer, but it's kind of an operation. But yes, it's one of my topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Sue. So our next speaker is Jamie Roberts from Kilnsey Park. So Jamie, you should be able to now control your own slides. So hand over to you. And I should also add that Jamie possibly is going to be experiencing a power cut. So if he disappears, we'll deal with that. But fingers crossed, the power holds for 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Alice. And thanks, Sue. You've got me thinking about sausage rolls now, so I won't keep everybody waiting too long. Anyway, this is, sorry, go on too far there. My name is Jamie Roberts, and I'm going to give you very much the small business perspective of AD today. We are farmers in the Yorkshire Dales, just north of Skipton. This is me standing in a derelict quarry, which we have on our farm. More of that later. But just to give you a flavour of what we do, we are sheep farmers. We've been here for 100 odd years. We've diversified over time. We have a large fish farm now, which produces about 60 tonnes of trout a year. We also have a recreational side to the business as well. So we have fishing lakes, holiday cottages. So we are quite a diverse business. So where you might wonder, would AD possibly fit into all of this? Well, we have, but in the last 12 months, come up with an idea that we want to diversify into vertical farming. Now, for those of you who don't know about vertical farming, it is a way of growing microgreens, mushrooms, and other things in a kind of controlled environment. So it gets around some of the climatic challenges that we have, particularly here in the Yorkshire Dales, where we have a very short summer. We have a very long winter, and it's wet when you don't want it to be wet, which is most of the time. So by growing in a contained inside environment, you can get around those things. The challenge is with vertical farming, and it's becoming a big sector now in the UK and across the world, is energy prices. And this is something that's really obviously come about pretty much since the Ukraine war, and we've seen the spike in energy prices over the last 12 to 18 months. And that's really undermined this model, because you're using obviously a lot of energy. Because you're able to grow 24/7, it means that you need to have LED lighting, you need to have controlled temperatures, all of which is quite power hungry, and that is undermining the economic model of this. So Our plan is to grow not only in containers, and there you can see the quarry on the left-hand side, which is where we're proposing to do this, but we want to power those containers in an off-grid way. And that would include solar panels. Again, the problem with solar panels in the Yorkshire Dales is we don't always see a lot of sun. A little bit of wind power, but mainly, and this is what we're most excited about, is AD. Because I'm going to come on to talk about some of the waste streams that we have in a minute locally, but we feel that AD can produce biogas that we can then power our containers off. So that's really how we've come to AD as being a potential solution for our new business idea. We looked at, I should come back actually, and Sue hit very rightly upon the networking potential of being part of BDC and BioVale. And that's been amazingly important for us as well. I think my first introduction to AD was going to a BioVale event in York sometime last year. And that's where I got to meet Anna and some of the BDC team. And we talked about different AD options. Now, it became clear to me that we didn't want to go into a large scale AD because of obviously there's a huge capital cost, as Sue touched upon there. There's then quite a, maintenance becomes an issue, and also feeding the beast, for want of a better word. If you have a big AD plant, you need to be pulling in a lot of raw materials. Now, we live in a small rural environment, and having big lorries going up and down the roads, I know, talking about local community issues, that would not go down well. So we stumbled upon this issue, this solution, which is from a company called Eco Nomad, and it's called their Bionomad. And this was introduced to us by the BDC, and it's very much a small scale AD. Effectively, it's like a polytunnel, and it can be fed a fairly small amount of material each day, something like a few hundred kilos, sorry. And that just means that it's something that from a farm perspective, I can use a tractor and a trailer, and it can be done in-house. And it will power a 6 kilowatt generator, which is going to be enough for what we need for one container. This system is also modular, so it can effectively, you can just add more and more of these polytunnels to. So that it's a great system, and it's ideal for the kind of size that we want to operate at. Now, in terms of our waste streams, well, we're in a rural area, and we've got obviously bottom right, plenty of cows around, so slurry is going to be one of our main feedstocks. Top left, we have a large horse stables on the farm, so that's going to be producing some manure and some rotted straw. Bottom left, my fish, so 60 tons of fish a year, they produce. Obviously, we capture a kind of sediment, which becomes a sludge, which we capture in tanks. And then top right, obviously, there's a number of businesses. We've got pubs and restaurants and cafes, all of which are producing food waste, as well as domestic food waste. So these are kind of the food stocks that we know we can gather from within, a 5-10 mile radius. We don't want to go much further apart than that. So this is where the BDC and the ADSI project came involved for us, because we wanted to know which of these feedstocks had the best biogas potential. So this was round about earlier this year. I bagged up 5 or 6 bags of unpleasant, foul-smelling feedstocks, and I drove over to York, and I dropped those samples off with the BDC guys, and then at their lab, they started to test the biogas potential. And this is kind of where we got to at the end of that process. And as you can see, each of the waste streams, the feedstocks, behaved differently. But what I was particularly happy to see is that the one material that I got right on my doorstep, and I have the most of, which is the fish sludge, actually performed the best, certainly in terms of it came fairly quickly to producing biogas, and it maintained a good yield over a long period of time, whereas some of these other feedstocks, they were kind of like a slower burn. They'd get there in the end, but they took longer. So, and then actually we did a mix as well, which performed very well. It was slower to get to a point of producing biogas, but once it got there, it really peaked out. So that was great for us, because that really told us that, yes, we've got materials on the doorstep that we can get to our AD very quickly and very easily, and they're going to perform well and produce a large amount of biogas for us. We did another ADSI project as well, which the BDC did for us, which was basically looking into, they did a kind of desk-based study in terms of what's going on in vertical farming, what some of the different systems are, whether it's hydroponic or aeroponic or aquaponic, looking at some of the high yield or high value crops that we could grow within this containerized system, and then looking at some of the costs that we're going to have to think about in terms of the high energy, and how AD would help to mitigate some of those costs. So that was a really good, useful, valuable desk-based piece of work, which has helped to influence our final scheme. This story has a very happy ending, because out of the collaboration that we did with the BDC, we were actually able to come up with a full project idea, which was to test the containerized off-grid growing system within our quarry here in the Yorkshire Dales. And that collaboration, we came up with a project, and we submitted an application to Innovate UK. And we were very happy to hear about 3 months ago that we were successful in that application. And we now have a 2-year project, which will be a collaboration between ourselves and the University of York and the BDC, where we'll be sort of testing this containerized system. We'll be testing the AD and how that connects, and how reliable the biogas is going to be in terms of producing a sort of consistent power source for us, looking at how we're going to integrate the solar panels into this, and the wind, and then also looking at the AD, what comes out the back of that in terms of the digestate, and whether we can use that as a biofertilizer. I know Sue touched upon that, and obviously we've got a farming community here. They've seen fertilizer prices go astronomically high over the last year. They've like tripled, quadrupled, and so farmers are looking for cheaper sources of fertilizer to put on the land around here as well. So if we can use the digestate, if we can purify that, take the toxins out of that, then hopefully we've got a product there which we can also make available to local farmers. So this project, we're really excited about it. It began as of the 1st of October. And watch this space. We're very much going to be based on circular lines. As Sue was saying, we want to use local waste to create local produce. We're going to involve the local community in this as well. We've got various local allotment groups, which we're going to be working with, not only to give them biofertilizer, but also to help propagate their seedlings for the allotment. So we're very much looking to bring the local community on board with this project, and we're very excited, and we think this is a replicable model, in that these containers, these off-grid containers, could be used to grow produce for local communities up and down the UK. I think the problem some of the vertical farming operations have had is that they are literally huge, and they are based in kind of these aircraft hangar-sized operations on motorways. So they're still relying on a lot of food miles, on a lot of carbon to get the food produced around to where it's needed to be. Whereas this off-grid localized system, we really feel that it's going to have great potential. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you, Jamie. That was really, really fascinating. We've had a question which I can answer actually, which is, could you repeat the name of the company you were supplying the AD system? And that's the company called Eco Nomad. And I've met with them. They've come to the BDC and had a meeting with me, and I've made some introductions to them, to other farmers again who are looking at installing one of their units. And I think an idea for a future event might be to come and visit one of the farms where they are installed and kind of see how it works. Because it seems like a really exciting, low-cost idea for people to kind of enter the AD market. So yeah, I'd like to involve you in that, Jamie, as well, maybe when you're a bit further along. So fantastic. Right, thank you very much. Right, I'll just stop sharing your slides. And then the next speaker, before we have a quick kind of comfort break, is Professor John Allport from the University of Huddersfield. And I had a meeting with John a little while ago, and he told me about what he was doing at Huddersfield. And I said, brilliant, it'd be really great if you could come and tell us about it at an event. And I'm delighted that he was able to come and join us today. And over to you, John.
Okay, thanks, Alice. Yeah, great to see the previous presentations. It really ties in well with what I'm about to show you. What we've been working on, give you a little bit of the history first of it. Much of my background's in turbo machinery. So I've come from very much an engineering background, and got a particular interest in microgas turbines. And one of the big areas of interest in that field is in making them run on biogas. And for a variety of reasons, as we'll see, but not least that if you try and run a gas engine generator on biogas, you typically need sort of 70–80% pure methane to run that on. So you've got to clean the methane up pretty well. For a gas turbine, you can run, or we have run the burner down to 35% methane, which is a big advantage in not having to clean everything up. So that's really where a lot of this originated from. So typical sort of biogas system, you've got a whole range of different feedstocks, and you can feed them into an anaerobic digester or pyrolysis or gasification. We're looking at any form of biogas generation at the moment, and you turn out your biogas, and you can turn that into heat and electricity, typically from a steam process, or you can purify it into biomethane and inject it into the grid, or use it as fuel, and then you've got other byproducts. And this is fairly typical sort of process. A lot of the work that I've done, and this particular set of funding, was for optimizing energy from waste systems in Africa. And we're not talking huge, great big systems there. We're more on the sort of scale that Jamie's just been talking about. In fact, we work with Economad. Ilan, who runs Economad, was in Uganda with me late last year, looking at exactly this sort of project. So we're wanting to take that sort of thing, and how are we going to best get electricity from biogas rather than converting everything through to biomethane or purifying the biomethane? Can we define what's actually in that biogas? And so that was part of our initial stage, in that I, as a turbo machinery engineer, ended up having to link up with our chemical engineers and get into can we analyze this biogas to a stage where we can figure out how can we use that to generate power. And then I can put that into one of my microgas turbines, and we can put power out, and they're effectively a CHP supply. So again, to Jamie's type system, the ideal sort of operation. So maybe we need to talk further about this, Jamie. So that was one of the first projects we were doing, and since then, and through links like this, we've been talking to all sorts of people, and the whole project has just snowballed. So this was probably this time last year. So we're only talking 12 months here that I'm going to run through, and just to show you the progress we've made in 12 months. So we brainstormed it all. This is my typical way of brain dumping onto post-it notes, and then so we started off with microgrids, and then how do we generate power, and then we'll use biogas and biofuels, but what are they and where do they come from? How can we generate them? What are the feedstocks? So we put all this together in a brainstorming exercise, and out of that came this vision as the university as an energy integration lab. We've got lots of, I don't call them waste streams, I call them fuel streams now within the university, because we realise that if it doesn't actually leave site, it doesn't actually become classified as waste, and therefore we don't pay all the usual waste disposal taxes and things like that on it. So there's a huge interest within the university as can we actually use these resources and generate power, which we can then feed back into the university. So that's how I've managed to persuade the university to give me a significant chunk of money to put this together. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. And biodigestion, AD, is a part of that. But I'm just putting it in context with everything else that we're doing, so you can see where AD fits alongside what we're working on. So our project specifically, or our first funded project, we're now on to the second phase of this, within 6 months even, was to look at, can we take waste from local companies and the university catering outlets and all sorts of other waste sources, and figure out what types of gas we produce from these different wastes. So similar to the sort of thing that Hans was on about, and that Jamie was on about, yeah, what with your different wastes, what types of gases do you produce? Because the constituent gases of the mixture gas, biogas that you produce has significant effect on what you can then do with it. So we wanted to know, what's the suitability of this gas to be able to run these micro turbines and gas engines? And that's one of the projects that we're actually doing with EcoNomad, is looking at, can we actually run gas turbines off the gas from their biodigesters? So that's sort of next stage. We're still in discussion as to whether we actually put a gas turbine at one of their sites or bring one of their units to our site. But ultimately, we're wanting to create electricity for the university's local storage grid, because we have a microgrid, test microgrid on campus. So we can put all sorts of power sources into what's basically a big battery bank, so that we don't have any big problems with G99 connections back to grid and that type of thing, where if you're putting different generators in, typically if you want to connect, you've got to have a connection for each generator into the grid and have that certified, and that's an absolute nightmare. So we're working with a battery bank that we can feed all the power into the battery bank, and then that battery bank then is our connection to the grid. So that makes life much, much easier. And that also powers the university. So we're currently taking, with the solar and the wind power we've got in there, we're up to about 0.5 megawatt at the moment. But we can add in whatever quantities we actually want. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is very small scale. So we're talking around 15 kilowatt gas turbine units as our base model. But from all these different power sources, we get things like pyrolysis char, we get biodigestate fertilizer, and we're looking at evaluating that, because again, that's something we can do within the university that can't typically be done on a site like we've been talking about this morning. And then similar to what Sue was talking about, we've got a collaboration with the local food partnership looking at identifying wastes that we can turn into energy, and we can use the char and the fertilizers and then expand that out. So it'll be very interesting talking to you, Sue, to see how we can take this further in Huddersfield. We're talking to Huddersfield markets, for example, because there's a lot of food waste produced in markets, a whole range of different things. Coffee shops. Coffee shops are really interesting because you get not only the coffee grounds, but a lot of the coffee cups can't be recycled. But in terms of pyrolysis, they're an ideal fuel. So we can get rid of coffee cups, which are a big problem otherwise. And we're wanting to take this not just on a lab scale, because a lot of people do this on lab scale. What we want to do is to be able to take this to a full scale for us, which is relatively small, but is relatively large when you compare it to availability of power in villages in northern Kenya and eastern Uganda, where I'm working at the moment, where we can take a 15 kilowatt unit and power an entire village. So we've got end users at that scale, which we can work with them as well. So we're looking at the technologies just to be able to facilitate these things. That's really the idea behind the project. So our biodigester, we got a tiny little biodigester, which is great. It's small, for biodigester scale. We're looking at, we have a total capacity of about 350 litres here. But the advantage of that is we get a relatively quick throughput. So we can change feedstock and see what the effect is. So we've had this since March, and we've been running different feedstocks for about 3 or 4 weeks at a time and seeing what the gas production is, what gases we get, analysing those gases. And we've had master's students and PhD students feeding this thing all sorts of different foods. So it ran for a month on chips. Biodigesters don't like chips. They give it indigestion. They really do not like chips and pasta. But we then got it into green veg, and it felt much better then. So we've got much better results from green veg, and then we're trying different proportions of mixed waste. And so we're doing a lot of work around what is the best way, in the same way as you've done, Jamie, with your different feedstocks. What's the best sort of mixture to get the best production from this? And some of the work we're also talking with EcoNomad about is similar to what Hans was on about, which is what are the best bacteria to run in this. We started off with an initial charge from a farmyard biodigester, but as we've analysed what's coming out, we're getting sort of changes in the bacteria constituents, and these things are evolving depending on what the feedstock is. So we can see that we can optimize by maintaining the same feedstock. It will optimize to that feedstock, and that's part of the research that we're wanting to do with this, is to continue to do that type of optimization, and to see whether we can actually grow the right type of bacteria for what we need for particular feedstocks, or whether we can find an optimum for a complete mixture of feedstocks. So that's a lot of the biodigestion that we're doing.
So we're a little bit over time, John. So if you could just, it's fascinating, but thank you.
You'll find that with me. I can talk about these things for hours. I normally have to students. But yeah, we've now got a brand new gas analyzer, which is really helping with analysing the different gases. So that's really proving useful. And we've got a team working on pyrolysis. So this is our micropyrolysis unit, which is designed for home use. So again, we're looking at home scale or small scale devices. So this actually is hiding there behind Freya, but it's a unit which would sit in your kitchen. You basically put all your household waste into it, and as long as it's carbon based, it's organic, it will pyrolyze into biogas, which at the back then of that unit we've got a standard gas boiler, which this gets co-injected into, which reduces the gas consumption of the boiler. So these are the sort of technologies that we're developing. This is our map as to where we're going. So yeah, composting, biodigestion, gasification, pyrolysis, along with photovoltaic and microhydro, all feeding through into our battery systems, and then ultimately, if we need to, into the grid. And it's CHP, so we've got heat going direct into the university as well. This is the plan. This is where we're at the moment. So we're not quite there with everything being integrated, but we have got food waste going through the anaerobic digestion. We're looking at general waste and other wastes going through pyrolysis. What do we get from them? Testing that, computational modeling of it, generating power through the genset, and testing that power in end use. So, this is a team that's currently working on it. So we've gone from an idea 12 months ago to a full-time team of 7 people currently working on this. We've 2 new starters coming in next month, and we've just been awarded another £350,000 to continue on with the project to the next phase. So this is our contact details. If anybody's interested, feel free to get hold of me, and more than happy to talk about this for as long as you like.
Thank you, John. That was really fascinating, and I'm sorry I had to cut you short. But I could hear you talk about that all morning, and I find it fascinating as someone who works at a university, and it makes me think, what could the University of York be doing? What could other universities be doing? And how could we learn from what you're doing? So yeah, really fascinating. We have had a question, but I will save that for the Q&A at the end. So if we just take a 5-minute comfort break now, you want to go and fill up your tea or coffee, and if we come back at 11 o'clock, and we'll hear from our last two speakers then. So yeah, just go and boil the kettle, and I'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everyone. I hope you're all refreshed and ready to move on to the next speaker. Right, so without further ado, I will hand over to my colleague Alex Jukes from the BDC. So we've heard a lot about, people have mentioned the BDC this morning and ways in which they've worked with us. And for those of you on the call who maybe aren't familiar with the BDC and what we do, particularly going forward post ERDF funding, I thought it'd be useful to do a little recap. So over to you, Alex.
Okay, thanks, Alice. So, yeah, I'm Alex. I'm a senior technologist at the Biorenewables Development Centre, and I lead the biogas area. So this includes anaerobic digestion, dark fermentation, analysis, and a wide range of wraparound services. In this presentation, I just wanted to give an overview of the facilities we have, how you can access these, and a little bit of information about some of the projects that we've carried out. Okay, so this is a bit of a slide just to show how the BDC can work. So as a company, we've been set up to be really flexible and to be able to aid a project at any point, whether it's just a small section or the whole thing. So this schematic shows the bioprocessing stages along the value chain, ideally starting with materials and building the profile through compositional analysis. This can include nutritional value, whether there are any compounds that might inhibit microbial growth, or something as simple as total solids and viscosity that can affect the flow through a system. Next along the arc comes system development, which includes process or engineering design for the conversion of materials into downstream products. So this could be designing an enzymatic process to work efficiently based on compositional makeup of materials. So like always planning ahead to ensure that design is thought out and that changes between lab scale and commercial scale have been considered. So in the 3 processing boxes, we start taking apart the actual process. So preparing materials for extraction, followed by separation and purification of compounds of interest. So these together make up the processing stages. So an example here could be seaweed, where we might need to dry and mechanically pre-treat the algae. So milling it or freeze drying. Before then, enzymatic processing to release the sugars and compounds of interest before further optimization steps for extraction and clean separation of the compounds of interest. So removing these higher value compounds and then maybe using these residues in AD. So this final segment in purple covers evaluation and testing of the end material, which might involve further nutritional or chemical, biological, compositional testing, along with some techno-economic assessment of the product within its intended market. This section could also include some high-level life cycle analysis and other value chain tests, including toxicity testing or waste disposal, like barriers. So there's just 2 points that I'm trying to make. So the first is that we can deliver the entire biorefining process from start material to end product, or we can just deliver chunks of processing at points that suit your projects. So different parts along the product value chain to supplement areas that you might already be delivering in-house. The second point is the scale of processing, which can go from a few grams up to 100 kilos. So whether it's finessing a new process at small scale or doing larger work for proof of concept. It's project dependent and we can work to the level of detail needed. For example, some projects have needed really thorough mass balance, input and output evaluation for preparation with talks for investors. So technical trials and processing along the arc can be supplemented with some customer discovery, market research studies, regulatory scanning, or supply chain mapping to help support placement of new products on the market. Okay, so how we work, but sort of more of how you can work with us really and access BDC facilities. So we have multidisciplinary activities. Our teams are made up with biologists, chemists, business people, engineers, and like a wide wealth of different experience. We're well placed to move fast, responding to client needs as they arise, including wraparound services, help with regulatory bodies, health and safety, or identifying funding. As well as using our team to complete projects, we also offer facilities for equipment or prototypes to be brought along and tested in an independent environment with expertise on hand. We currently have a partner in one of our larger projects who've brought their 1 tonne per hour prototype feedstock treatment unit and are now based in one of our units. This has been really great because it's allowed us to work directly with them. So they treat materials and then we can analyse them pretty much straight away and carry on processing on those materials. So we've been doing dark fermentation with material that they've treated. It's removed the need to worry about storage, like freezing samples and changing like a sample matrix. But it's also allowed us at small scale to more closely mimic the continuous process that we would have in real life. But as well, we've also been able to just work together more closely, get insight into 2 different parts of the biorefinery process, like streamlining it and spotting kinks and just being really collaborative, which will help before we go to demonstration scale. We're also open access. We can offer lab space or office space for hire. So we recently housed a startup company, giving them lab and office space along with equipment access. They were with us for around a year, but they've now left us and built their own lab next door, which is great because they've got a bigger team and they've just basically grown out of us. So it's a really good example. So yeah, as I mentioned, I kind of lead the biogas area, which is one of our core areas. So similar to the previous slide about biorefinery capabilities, we can work across all areas of biogas production. So starting with feedstocks, can we treat a feedstock to produce more gas? Can we extract valuable compounds first? So we had a project where we first hydrolyzed and extracted sugars for fermentation to platform chemicals, and then we took that residual solid for anaerobic digestion to evolve methane. We can look at the process itself, optimizing parameters such as temperature, pH, loading to increase the volume of methane produced per gram of material. So we're always looking to make the process more sustainable and productive. We have a lot of wraparound analysis to characterize materials going in, coming out, and also during the process. So for example, we can monitor volatile fatty acids throughout digestion to understand when the process is overloaded or underloaded. And this helps us balance feeding rates and residency times. BDC has also worked with a few companies that have products designed to increase methane production. So we've provided independent testing of these products to confirm effectiveness and also start building a portfolio using different feedstocks and inoculum. At the end of the process, we then have the digestate, which is still full of compounds. As we've mentioned in previously talks, typically it's used for fertilizer. So we can analyze this material to see how suitable it is as fertilizer. And we can also explore other uses for the material. So extracting valuable platform chemicals or using as a growth medium. Yeah, there's a real wide range of things you can do with digestate. So it's interesting to keep that open. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention a couple of projects that we've worked on. So this project was with Natural England, the University of Hull and Teesside University. And it's interesting because it brought together a few different sides. So Natural England wanted to improve the biodiversity of some of their sites. These sites are managed by volunteers, so they didn't really have funding to look after them. So their idea was that if they could use material from these sites for anaerobic digestion, that income would then fund further volunteers and let them look after their sites more closely. So BDC and Teesside provided anaerobic digestion expertise. So we tested different materials, different inoculums from their sites to see which ones might be suitable, which ones produced high amounts of methane. But then University of Hull were looking at the effects of these management ideas. So if you were cutting material twice a year, taking it away from the sites, what effect did that have on biodiversity and the health of the site in general? And obviously different sites were made up of different things. So we looked at salt marshes, we looked at heath, heaths with grass, loads of different areas, and every area was suggested different needs. So for some it was cutting 6 times a year, for some it was cutting just once a year and removing that material. And yes, some sites it would improve biodiversity and some sites it wouldn't. So it helped Natural England build a bit of a portfolio as to which sites would be suitable for anaerobic digestion, and would they be able to even house a digester there. So that project's kind of ongoing, but it was really interesting to bring together some different disciplines. And then the other project I'm just going to touch on lightly, because Debs is going to go into more detail on this, but we've been looking at dark fermentation for basically before anaerobic digestion, so pulling off hydrogen, well, producing hydrogen from feedstocks before they go into AD, so giving more value. This project has had a few challenges, and the biggest one we've found has been getting the right microbial culture to produce hydrogen, and then maintain this this culture and giving it the right feedstocks to then evolve hydrogen. So we've been testing out different types of heat treatment for the inoculum. We've also been testing cavitation and ozone. So with the inoculum, basically what we want to do is reduce the methanogens or completely get rid of them, but also increase the amount of hydrogen producers we have by causing them to produce spores via stress. So we've found some really interesting results. Basically, the methanogens are pretty hardy, and as we increase the temperature, a lot of the time they actually increase their production as well. But then we get to a certain temperature where the methanogens just drop off, and then we start seeing more hydrogen production. And interestingly, we see a similar trend with UV and cavitation. The more passes we do through the system, so the more exposure they have to that, we then see the methanogens dropping out, and then the hydrogen producers start to increase, which is great. But then we also have to maintain this culture, make sure it's happy, giving it feedstocks that it finds useful. So we've looked at loads of different things: chicken litter, forestry waste, food waste, paper waste, just to name a few. And it's been really variable as to what they like. So I think actually probably find that different inoculum and different treatments work better for different feedstocks. So it's building a bit of a matrix as to which ones work for which materials, which inoculums. And then we've also been taking this from, so in these pictures, I've got our batch system. So this is a batch 1 litre, basically a little digester. And then in the right, we've got our 10 litre continuous systems. So converting what we find at batch then into the continuous systems, which is completely different because we're not running it to completely the end. We're trying to find that balance between feeding in and flowing through the system, but also producing the most amount of hydrogen and making the most of the materials before they then go on to anaerobic digestion. Okay, so I'm going to just leave it there. So yeah, thank you for listening, and any questions, please shout.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, if you want to put them in the Q&A, and we'll have a quick time for a few questions at the end, I hope. Thanks very much for that Alex. I will remove your slide control there. And fantastic. So next, we're going to be hearing from Debs Rathbone, my colleague at the BDC, who's going to be talking about the Hydrogen BECCS Innovation Programme. So I'll just give you control of your slides, Debs. Okay.
Thanks, Alice. Hello, everyone. So yes, I'll spend the next few minutes just really following on from what Alex has already introduced, the H2 Boost project. We're in the second phase of this. I'll talk briefly about the first phase as well. But biohydrogen production is perhaps a new venture for the BDC. It's certainly only something we've been doing really or engaging with really for about the last 9 to 12 months. But it very much builds on the expertise and experience that we've developed around the AD sector, as will become apparent. It's funded by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, DESNZ for short. I'll talk very briefly about phase 1. So this was a short project. It was just 6 months. It ended in December last year. It was led by the University of Leeds. So it was a multi-group venture. And the 3 sort of main areas that I'll talk about now. The first one was around identifying and mapping waste, so actually seeing what's available. This project was focused on activities in England, so it very much had to focus on feedstocks arising in England. And so we looked at a whole load of different feedstocks which were available at scale, which were problematic feedstocks, which were likely to be increasing, and looking at the trends of where they've been and where they're likely to be over the next 5 to 10 years. And so you can see a list of them there on the left-hand side. And what we did was to assess different types of information, so looking at databases produced by local authorities, RAP, DEFRA, Natural England, Forestry Commission, and so on, and then to take all that information about what wastes were arising and where they were arising, and overlaying that with the sites, AD sites across England. And you can see a map there on the right hand side, which is taken from the virtual time region map section, which lists all the commercial farm fed and waste fed AD sites across the country. And so what we were trying to do is see where these types of feedstocks were arising relative to the AD sites, because what we were trying to do was to develop a biohydrogen system that could effectively sit alongside an existing AD plant. That would be the eventual aim. A site which was already had the infrastructure in place and the feedstock availability to run their AD site. And as Alex said, to have a sort of almost like a pre-treatment section where we were producing biohydrogen before then the residue went into anaerobic digestion. So we identified a number of waste streams, and the locations seem to really sort of be predominantly the east of the country there, as shown. And then the second stage was to actually proof of the pudding, can we make biohydrogen from these feedstocks? So just showing a snapshot there, as Alex has already said, we were looking at inoculum preparation, just at lab scale at this point, looking at pre-treatment of feedstocks, and we're using a pre-treatment system developed by a company called Green Thread. And their system, the BioBooster, uses UV, ozone and cavitation and so on to really sort of treat lignocellulosic, really tough recalcitrant feedstocks to make them more digestible. And we showed that depending on the type of pre-treatment or whether we were using enzymes in the process as well, we were able to liberate hydrogen. And we also had a look at the microbial profile as well as the volatile fatty acid composition as well. So really trying to get a handle on what was happening in those dark fermentation vessels. We then took that residue and from the dark fermentation and put it into anaerobic digestion to see what effect on yield there might be, and to look at the nature of the digestate that was arising. And the graph there just shows again a comparison between material that had been digested that has gone straight into AD or through dark fermentation first. And you can see differences depending on what's happened to the material already, the nature of the material and the pre-treatment processes and so on. So really a good data gathering exercise. And on the back of that, we applied for phase 2 funding. And that's the project that has just started. Again, funded by DESNZ, this time to the tune of 5 million, and it's running between July this year and March 2025, with the bulk of the actual practical work ending in November 2024. So a fairly short, sharp project, and is bound to cause a few sleepless nights and increase the grey hairs, I think, along the way. But essentially, the cartoon here just shows the process. We've got the BioBooster system, providing pre-treatment for feedstocks, also noted enzymes there as well. So at the moment we're looking at commercially available enzymes, so from Verdant Biotech and also Novozyme, to see how they work in conjunction or instead of the BioBooster pre-treatment system. And then looking, as Alex said, at ways of preparing inoculum and thinking about the sort of scale that we're working at for dark fermentation. We're looking at a total of about 15,000 litres for dark fermentation. You can imagine a sort of 20–30% initial inoculum. That's a whole different scale of activities to just preparing a few hundred mils in a lab. So all the time thinking about what we're doing in the lab now and how that's going to scale up at demonstration scale. The hydrogen produced from dark fermentation, we hope to be able to clean up and separate and to compress into fuel cells. The idea is this would feed hydrogen fuel cells for the transport industry. Then the residue from dark fermentation, as I've said, aims to go into anaerobic digestion, releasing methane, which we can put through CHP for heat and power, but also the carbon dioxide and the residue from AD feeding into algae or cyanobacteria systems. And there's a whole range of different strains being screened at this scale, so very much dependent on the digest state that they're being given, how well they grow, and the sorts of products they make. So the different, just going to move my viewer here. So the different activities within the project. So at lab scale, we're looking at inoculum development, the pre-treatment. As Alex said, we have the biobooster system on site, so we're able to combine output from that with the various enzymes that we have. We're also, as part of part B of the project, looking at new enzymes coming out of the University of York, so predominantly around lignocellulosic material degradation. So we'll have a chance to put some of those through their paces in the second part of the project. So we're looking at the dark fermentation, the anaerobic digestion, and then working with our colleagues for the algal and cyanobacterial strain evaluation and growth systems. When we get to demonstration scale, build and testing, there's all the planning and permitting, the design, the build, the installation, and then 1,000-hour performance testing, which we need to pass. Running alongside that will be the hydrogen cleanup and the CO2 separation and storage. We're very much wanting to make this a real practical exercise, and so alongside the very practical elements of it, we're looking at supply chain analysis, market engagement, the preferred scale to match supply chains, the sort of market value, I guess, of this, and then the sustainability elements as well, looking at life cycle analysis, economic assessment, as well as any regulatory and policy considerations. Now, the difficult part of all this, or one of the difficult parts of all this, is all of these activities are running in parallel. So in an ideal world, we would have, several years to perfect the R&D scale activities at lab scale before we then went on to design and build a demonstration scale system. But here, because it's only a 21-month project, we're having to do everything in parallel. So that necessitates the demonstration scale really being built to be as flexible as it possibly can. So while we're still discovering how to develop the perfect inoculum or how to better pre-treat the feedstocks, the demonstration scale can be built with enough flexibility to allow these new techniques and new methodologies to be incorporated at a later date. There will be industry dissemination workshops. We plan to hold 3 of these currently, April and September next year, and then a final one at the end of the project in January 2025. And running alongside all of this is project management and engineering project management as well. So quite a busy few months ahead for us. We're not doing this on our own, of course. The BDC is the lead partner here, so providing project management across the whole project. But we have colleagues, Greenthread, who are providing the pre-treatment expertise. Then our colleagues at University of Leeds and Cyanocapture, who are respectively looking at algal strains and cyanobacterial strains and systems. And then Cube Renewables, who are experienced in the design and production of anaerobic digestion systems. And so they are basically, along with Aardvark, designing and building the demonstration scale systems. All the demonstration scale work is being undertaken at the Maltings Organic Treatment, which is out towards Leeds and is not only providing site and security and services, but also supply of feedstocks. So very used to handling large scale waste streams. Then we have our colleagues at the NNFCC and also CM90 who are looking more at the regulatory and techno-economic and life cycle analysis, again with input from BDC into those activities as well. and then colleagues at AB Agri who are providing support with the analysis of the processed feedstocks. So a real team effort here. So we're just at the start of this. We're, as Alex said, looking at inoculant preparation and the first of the feedstock pre-treatments. So watch this space. We'll be giving updates on our website and also through social media as well. So please do stop in and look at those every now and then. If you want to know about more case studies or facility details for the BDC, again, have a look at the website. If there's any specific questions about H2 Boost, Penny Cunningham is the project manager. Her contact details are there. And if you have any queries about the BDC or general bioscience activities at the BDC, feel free to drop me a line as well. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Debs. I'll just stop sharing the slides now. Right, and I see we've had a few questions. So we haven't got loads of time. So if you could give fairly brief answers, that would be great. And I'll start with you, Debs, because there was the question for you. I don't know if you can probably see it in the Q&A, or I can read it out.
Okay.
Can you see it? So it's
Laura,
great.
yeah.
Yes, so it's great to see H2 production. Oh, hang on. Oh, something else has just jumped down, and someone else put a question in there.
Disappeared.
Has it disappeared?
Yes, great to see H2 production and make sure dark fermentation is feasible at large scale. I wondered, why are you focusing on lignocellulosic material? Seems to be an additional hurdle to try and assess the technology, given that there are easier to degrade feedstocks. So that's a fair point. Lignocellulosic material we encountered during the mapping process in phase 1. So things like chicken litter and sort of poultry manures and things like that have a quite high lignocellulosic content. But we are also looking at things like food waste, so household food waste arising, as well as food waste from food manufacturing, so centrifuge cake and sort of non-lignocellulosic materials, but which are quite difficult to handle and use currently within AD. So it's a whole range of different feedstocks at the moment, and the biobooster and the enzyme pre-treatments are there to help us with the more recalcitrant, difficult feedstocks, which are more likely to be lignocellulosic.
Thank you, Deb. So we've got a couple of questions for John Allport as well. The first one is, are any students involved in the operation of the plant? I guess they were feeding their chips in, but maybe you can tell us.
Not directly feeding their own chips in, but yes, we've had both undergraduate and master's students involved on a variety of aspects of the project, including feeding the biodigester and doing the analysis of the gases. So we're trying to incorporate this into as many areas of the curriculum as we can.
Yeah, it's a true community engagement, which is obviously what Sue was talking about as well. Another question for you, John, as well, is great work that you're doing with small-scale AD. Have you had any publications yet? I'm interested particularly in the use of biogas to produce heat and power without extensive cleaning in such small scales.
Yeah, that's our real objective, is to try and minimise the amount of gas cleaning and gas modification that's required. Now, whether that's through the aspects that the BDC are doing in looking at optimizing the gas production and minimizing the amount it needs cleaning, or from my perspective, coming from essentially a diesel engine's background, where you don't have much control over what the content of the diesel is in terms of sulfides and chlorides and things like that. We're trying to develop machinery, turbo machinery in particular, that is resistant to any contaminants that might be in there, so that we can then use more conventional sort of diesel after treatment systems, which are well understood and commercially available, to actually treat the gas, the exhaust gas emissions from the gas turbine, rather than treating the gas before it goes in there. So the fact that we can burn gas down to 35% methane is a big step forward to be able to do that. We're not too worried about having to take out all the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and all the other nasties that are in there. So that's our objective.
Thank you, John. There's one last question we've had for Debs, which I don't know if you can see it in the chat. Is your
Yeah.
pre-treatment a combination of UV, O3 and cavitation? Or do you have a specific type for specific feedstock composition?
Okay, so the answer is maybe. So we're currently at the moment looking at the BioBooster, which, as you quite rightly said there, it can provide a combination of UV, ozone and cavitation, but we can separate these out, so we can test feedstocks flowing through the system with each of these individually or in combination, and at different flow rates and different intensities. So it's quite a sort of flexible system, and we'll tailor the intensities of treatments and the combination of treatments there to the feedstock that's going through. So something like food waste, for example, may not need all of that, may just need a more mechanical treatment almost, but it may be that some of the tougher feedstocks might need more of an intense treatment. So that's very much under evaluation at the moment, and again, as I said, with the use of enzymes as well. Last part of the question, is there a net energy gain with this range of pre-treatment? Well, that's to be seen, really, and that's what we'll be studying, all the kind of energy inputs and outputs, as well as the logistics and the life cycle assessment around these sorts of activities as well. So as yet, we don't know. It remains to be seen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our panelists and people joining us to listen to this webinar. I found it really fascinating. And for me, what's been particularly satisfying is every time someone spoke, someone then has said, oh, I think I should join up with you because I was interested in what you were saying. We can link our projects, and kind of that's what we're here for. I'll just put my email address in the chat. So if someone has spoken this morning and you think I'd like an introduction to them, or I didn't quite catch their email address, just drop me an email and I'm happy to make any one-to-one introductions that could be useful. That's what I'm here for. So yes, by all means, get in touch. And yeah, really fascinating. We've recorded this, so it will be available. Someone also shared details of another event around food waste that we've put in the chat, but again, we'll send an email out and we're happy to share that event on our social media as well. So to give people the chance to sign up for that. And just leaves me to say thank you very much, and see you all soon, I hope, in some capacity. Bye.
Bye.